Cape Town. The urban housing crisis in Cape Town is growing at a rapid rate, particularly in this current state of the world, with factors such as an epidemic and subsequent inflation exacerbating the issue. This housing crisis involves various aspects, including high prevalence of informal housing residents, increased housing prices, and extremely high density areas. Informal housing can be defined as occupying land without legally recognised tenure, and are typically seen in the form of shacks and squatting on public land. These makeshift houses often lack in sanitisation and basic needs, which means the informal nature of the city is a deadly and necessary aspect to combat. Informal dwellings almost always do not comply with planning and development policies, hereby being at risk of collapse and increased susceptibility to natural disasters due to rudimentary building materials. These informal households are also in high-density areas with a lack of security and privacy, which puts the residents at risk, along with a lack of running water and electricity, which in turn takes away the basic needs of these residents. Typically, these most negatively affected communities are black communities that have been unevenly spatially distributed due to previous historical events in South Africa, from the brutal colonisation of the Cape by European powers to the racially based policies of the past decades that have marginalised these communities and left them remaining substantially skewed. Only approximately 8,000 to 10,000 formal houses are being developed annually in Cape Town. These segregated communities cannot afford to live in the inner city where well-paying jobs exist, forcing these people to reside in communities which are situated in inconvenient, informal and unsafe conditions. While there are a selection of theories that may be considered viable to combat this issue, such as investment in employment and industry or slum regeneration, I believe that increased provision of social housing will allow the most change to occur in the city. Social housing provision in Cape Town hasn't been able to combat the severe housing crisis in the city so far, as it has not necessarily focused on the delivery of housing and social housing projects, but has rather focused on the housing affordability aspect of the new developments. While increasing housing affordability is a key way to combat the struggles of poor individuals, the housing backlog of over 600,000 people means the battle for these limited new developments will be fierce and complicated for some. Hereby, this video is directed at NGOs and non-profit organisations such as NASHO, the City of Cape Town Government, and the South African Council for Planners, as I believe this is the most viable option to combat the housing crisis in Cape Town. Social housing provision plans of African governments are often highly spoken about during politicians' agendas during election time, but often these do not materialise. This is most likely due to a lack of real planning and thought in regards to housing plans, as the plans are almost always solely an election promise. Hereby, housing backlogs are often exacerbated by this failure to deliver, making it common that the housing units end up being bought or rented by wealthier households with more financial stature, leading to slums enlarging and many left in the dark in regards to their future. However, I believe that the implementation of increased social housing, if approached properly in Cape Town, will heavily impact the housing crisis of the city in a positive way. Firstly, revised social housing policy that is clearly informed by communities and their opinions will be key in addressing the needs and necessities of these communities. The Western Cape Inclusionary Housing Policy is one such policy that, even though it has not been implemented yet to its full, needs to be revised. Community-centred policy and participatory development will allow the right circumstances to be considered for various communities, because no one knows the community more than the community itself. Further, incentives should be explored for financial institutions and private developers which are responsible for much of the development in the city. This may reduce the housing backlog significantly, as these institutions are driven by high profits, with incentives possibly creating more commitment towards the cause. Finally, investment in economic activity and new and existing social housing developments is key, allowing residents to find secure work and save money and time on aspects such as travel and job seeking. New communities may also be created as diverse areas, where this could be economically or racially, which will prevent more segregation and create a multi-class neighbourhood. Overall, if approached correctly, increased investment in social housing provision will be a key way to alleviate the stresses of the abundance of informal housing in Cape Town, and while expensive, will be an investment the city will reap the rewards of in the future with increased communities who are engaging in economic activity and are financially stable.